So here we are at one of the more popular, famous verses in all the scriptures, the end of Romans chapter 8. And Paul says that we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. And that's a verse that often gets quoted, and it's just a beautiful verse. But what does it mean to be called according to God's purpose? Well, it means ultimately our glorification, because if you watch how Paul continues there, he says that for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed into the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. And so I think the all things working together for the good of those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. There's two hints there on the ultimate good that God is working out through all things. I think the first good we have to consider is being called according to God's purpose. And the end of God's purpose, you see in this passage, is our glorification. And our glorification, of course, means that we are conformed to the image of his Son, verse 29. And so whatever you're going through, whatever's in your future or your past, if you're in Christ, all things are working together for your ultimate good. And the ultimate good, of course, is your Christ-likeness, your eventual glorification. And God does 1,000 things when he takes us through thick and thin. And it's important to keep in mind that the end of all that we experience, there's a lot of evils that we face. Evil is not good. But the good that God works in and through it, the ultimate good, the ultimate end, the much, much, much greater goods that God is bringing about, that according to his inscrutable wisdom, is our Christ-likeness. And the issue is, do you trust that? Now, it depends on the day, or it depends on the moment, depends on the circumstance. Sometimes we do wholeheartedly. We're so humbled, we have nothing else to do except trust God. Oftentimes we struggle to trust that. God, are you really working this out for my ultimate good, my ultimate Christ-likeness? Because I can't see it. Certainly doesn't appear that way. This is hard. It hurts. There's pain, physical, spiritual, anguish. How is this ultimately going to be worked out for good? And I think that's why Paul continues there at the end of Romans 8 by emphasizing how nothing could ever separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Nothing that we face, nothing about these all things that come our way will ever separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. And the reality of those all things is they will conform us into the image of the incarnate blessed Son of God, our ultimate Christ-likeness. So take comfort in that, no matter what you're going through. It doesn't mean there's not space for lament and crying out like the psalmist, but there definitely is space to have that hope. And no matter what you see or what we feel, because our seeing and our feeling is very real. But as Luther said, the organ of faith isn't sight, it's the ear. It's not the eyes. It's the promises that come in our ear. So I want to encourage you to take courage, to take comfort, to take heart in those all things that you're currently experiencing or have or will. That the ultimate good that God is bringing about is your Christ-likeness. And that through those all things, that nothing will ever separate you from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Nothing. Life, death, things present, things future, nothing ever will separate you from the love of God in Christ Jesus. And in fact, it's the love of God in Christ Jesus, and that he's working really in and through you, through your spirit, to conform you into the image of his Son. Trust that by faith, you who are in Christ. Take comfort in those all things, through those all things. That ultimate Christ-likeness is the goal in God's timing, according to his wisdom and his plans. May he grant us patience as he works that out in our lives, the lives of us who believe. Be blessed.